This is a pan tilt zoom video camera designed for essentially recording live events, and it has lots of standards that can send off to things like Open Broadcast Studio. And this is the type of camera you would set up if you were like streaming a live event. For example, the church services is one of the examples they use. So it's not strictly speaking a security camera, although it can be powered power over Ethernet, and it does, do pan tilt zoom type motion. So they have sent this to me for free to review. If you wanted to purchase it, it would cost you around $460, and that's with a coupon I've seen online. They haven't paid me for my review, and my opinions remain my own. Alright, so the box contents, you have a pretty impressive remote control here. There's an HDMI cable. There's a USB high-speed cable with kind of the fancy B interface to the camera, and then USB-A port on this side. We have a couple of different brackets here for mounting. You have some pretty good-sized lag bolts for putting some of these brackets in place. There's a little power supply to power the camera if you're not doing power over Ethernet. We have the manual and quality certificate, and then this is the main camera unit itself. So this is an HD camera, and they claim 20x optical zoom, and then they also claim 16x digital zoom. And you can see here that it's moving around on its own a little bit. There's a speaker, it looks like, in the back here, and then there's a lot of options for hooking this guy up. You have SDI, you have USB, we have the LAN for power over Ethernet and HDMI, and they have here RS-232 in and out. So this cable here is a DB9 to their proprietary RS-232 cable. Alright, so according to the manual, this little dial is reserved for now. It has no function for now. This guy here it's an RS-485 connection block if you're using that, and then RS-232 plugs into these ports here. And then there's a 12-volt power supply and a power switch. So I suspect most people are probably going to either connect up HDMI, possibly power over Ethernet, or maybe use it as a USB camera, but they have some other options as well. So it looks like if you were trying to just stream a church service to the internet with one piece of hardware, you could do it with this and an internet connection with Ethernet. If you plug this guy into the internet, you can use the menuing system here, and you probably either need to log in with the web browser or connect the HDMI out to a monitor so you could put up the on-screen menus. But you can get a URL where basically you put that URL into your, for example, a YouTube Studio, and YouTube Studio would pull directly from the camera. You could adjust the viewpoints of the camera with the remote control, and you wouldn't even need to use a computer necessarily. So you'd probably need a computer to manage YouTube and so forth, but essentially you could just have a laptop and then maybe use the remote control to move the camera around if you needed to. There's also an auto-intelligent framing that will detect humans and try to keep them in the frame. So it's potentially possible you could set this up and kind of just have a live stream that goes without any fancy editing or shifts between cameras, but you would be able to just kind of set up a stream the entire service, and then turn it off at the end. But it's also advanced enough to support a system where you have a full broadcast booth. You have multiple cameras, and this is just one of them coming in. You'd probably do NDI over the LAN or SDI over that port there. So the remote control has a little finger notch. You just put your fingernail in there and this thing pops off. It requires 2x AAA batteries, so you will have to provide your own AAA batteries to power the remote control. Now, if you've purchased multiple of the same camera, the remote control does allow you to select between different cameras, so you can use one remote to control up to 4 different cameras. Alright, I plugged this guy into my Linux laptop, found a super speed USB device, UVC 1.0 webcam gadget device. So that's how it identifies on the USB port. Alright, plugged this guy into an Ethernet port. Figured out the IP address that had been assigned by looking at the on-screen menu or under networking where it shows the IP address with the USB cable. Then I unplugged the USB cable. Now I'm connecting to it over the network just with the Firefox web browser here. Alright, and we have a little window here that displays the live view. We have pan, tilt, zoom control, which is working. I think there's a rendering bug where this little window should be in the big area. They have settings where I can change various information about it, upgrade the firmware, reboot, set network settings, do settings about audio and video streaming and so forth, adjust the image settings, white balance, and you can set up multiple users with different accounts. Now, it does not have a self-signed SSL certificate, so you will be connecting to this guy with standard HTTP. It's not secure, so as long as you trust your network, you can log in here just fine. But just keep in mind it's not an encrypted setup. Alright, so this is the Chromium web browser, and this looks a little better in that the window is kind of most of the screen here. And so we can zoom and move. It's very fast there on that pan speed. I'm going to change the pan speed down to 1. Oh, that was the tilt and the pan speed are separate. So it's still relatively quick with the pan speed here, which might be good. So autofocus is having some trouble with the tree in the foreground. So this is maximum zoom, controlling it pretty well over just the basic web interface. So this is all the way out. And this is zoomed into the 20x zoom. Now, I don't see any options to record from the web interface, but you could use it to control it, set up presets and so forth, as opposed to buying a control panel that's dedicated to the camera. I believe this is mostly for setting up a streaming IP address, so you'd basically set up your stream and configure your substream and your mainstream, and then link to that and import that from some other software. It supports SRT, RTMP, RTSP, which is the default, NDI, NDI-HX, and FPGA IP. Now, most of these are off by default, so NDI is turned on by default, and RTSP is just as always on. There's no option to turn that off. But all of the others are off by default, and you'll have to turn those on if you're using those with one of your systems. So I can just copy this major URL from the RTSP protocol, put that into any software that streams with RTSP, and as long as it's on the local network here, it'll be able to connect to the camera and get that stream. So this page pretty much just kind of shows the basics of everything it supports. You have, viewing previews over just a web browser, RTSP, ONVIF, video port, VISCA for controlling the pan, tilt, zoom over IP. So here I have it streaming RTSP to Open Broadcast Studio, and this is a live view. Alright, so I have a Open Broadcast Studio RTS stream, and I'm also using the pan tilt zoom controls. And so we can zoom the 20x optical zoom. We can control the pan tilt zoom, although it's a little bit laggy in the control sequence here, so you have to be careful with how long you're pushing the buttons. But essentially, everything is working from Linux, open source, Open Broadcast Studio. Alright, I have the camera feed streaming over Ethernet, and I've also set up several presets with the pan tilt zoom control. So this is all the way zoomed in. This is zoomed back out as far as it'll go. And then we can move and zoom to certain locations within the scene with these presets. So the pan tilt zoom control is working over IP. I'm using Open Broadcast Studio with the pan tilt zoom plugin here. And so it is working perfectly with this Linux-based system, all open source software. Now, due to the lag in the networking and the pan tilt zoom control buttons, you have to be a little careful when you push these buttons because the response to them takes about a second to appear. So I push 1001 and then the camera moves. So if I push and hold, it'll take a second before it starts moving, and then it moves for quite a while. They're a little touchy, and you have to be careful with using them. So it's not a great joystick control for like following water skiers. I've found that using the remote control gives me more responsive control and more rapid control. But if you're looking to program in some presets, you can move it to where you want it, program the presets, and then jump to the presets anytime you want. So ideally you'd have this guy plug into like a gigabit hub directly to your computer. I have it running through a powerline Ethernet adapter and then over Wi-Fi to my computer, and it's actually working surprisingly well for all of the links in the network there. I've been very happy with this pan tilt zoom kind of broadcast quality indoor camera. Pretty much everything I've tried with it on Linux just worked. I plugged in the USB port, it shows up as a supported webcam. If you're using USB for the webcam, you do have to use the remote control for pan tilt zoom control. Now, I plugged it in over Ethernet. I was able to do the pan tilt zoom control over IP with a plug-in for Open Broadcast Studio. And so that was the VISCA protocol, kind of the Sony protocol. Now, I have not tried the RS-232 protocols. I haven't done SDI. I have not used NDI over the networking. It has a lot of features I haven't used, but everything I have tried worked exactly as I'd expected. Image quality was really good. I had a little bit of dropouts because I was streaming it over a Wi-Fi connection to a laptop at one point, but for the most part, especially when I was connected with a cable as opposed to going over Wi-Fi, the video streamed just perfectly. It has preset points. It goes right back to the preset points. You set in your places you want to hit, and you can hit one button and go to any of those presets, and it's very repeatable, going exactly back to that point and that zoom level. The autofocus worked well enough that I never felt the need to turn it off. I never felt I needed to manually focus something. You can turn it off and manually focus. I was pretty darn happy with the autofocus. So it is an expensive camera, and with that expense you get all the features, nice high quality images, nice lens. The zoom is quite impressive. I can be zoomed all the way into a bird way up in the top of a tree and see the bird, and when you zoom back out of that you can definitely see how far that zoom works. So I am very happy with this camera.